morning, everyone, and welcome into our studio. The last time we were together, we did this rainbow picture, which demonstrates the full spectrum of the colors using just 3 colors to create them. The yellow, the red, and the blue to create the orange, the green, and the violet. And today I'm going to show you how this can be transformed to a beautiful little landscape painting that will bring you joy and refresh you. So let's get started. Okay, everyone, you can see I'm all set up with my 2 buckets of water, one for washing off yellow and the other for the reds and blues. And I have my 3 colors here, yellow, red, and blue. If you need to know how to mix up stock mark colors, you could check that out on another one of my YouTube videos on how to mix up the wet on wet paints. And I have a selection of brushes here. And now I'm going to get started first with the big brush. And you can see that I've reconstituted the paper with just a spritzer of water because it's been dry for a few days now, so it's going to need a little bit of wetness. And as usual, I'm going to start with the yellow. And I'm going to bring this yellow right on to the greens. Green is a nice one to start with because we all associate green with the plant kingdom, and rightfully so. So I'm going to just get the yellow going into those greens. And as I do so, I'm going to change the tops a bit every time I paint. So if last time I had a little bit of a slope, this time I will consciously change that slope a bit so that they are somewhat irregular. These look like grassy knolls more than they do mountains. So I'm not going to have them bumping up too high. But if I want them to be a richer green, I can just take a little blue from down below and place that into the upper portion. And then let's get this into a deep foresty green down here and have some other hills that might separate the background from this foreground. Here I'm just looking at where the color indicates to me to want to be bumping up. And see, I wouldn't want to have the same hill here just like that hill there. So let's change that, bring it into some different form so that it doesn't look the same as that which is right behind it. That would be a little bit boring and definitely not lifelike. So I'm going to keep going here, and I could even take little bits of upward gestures if I wanted to create sort of like trees on here. And I just let these appear. And I'm sort of using a tapping motion to get these. And if I want them to be a little darker, I'll just get a little blue from down here and pop it on. Keep playing with that for a few minutes. One thing I've noticed about these videos is that people are used to having things happen very fast because of our modern technological age. And in life, that really isn't the way things are. Things evolve over time. and time isn't always so speeded up. So I think we should relax a little bit and enjoy the process of painting and let it appear naturally and somewhat slowly. Let's let these get a little bit bigger. And so far, I haven't needed to add any color to my brush. I've just been using what's on the paper here. Now, what if I want to get this beautiful blue down below a little bit richer? I'll wash off my brush and dip right into my Prussian blue, and then I can just really intensify this blue down here. It could be water if I would leave it light, but today I think I'm going to go ahead and enrich it quite a bit. I'm going to bring some little lines of blue, maybe even more of this darkness up front. Just this difference between a smooth gesture and a more scumbled, textured type of brushwork. So here we can see more of a wash and this scumbling type work. And as we get farther away from whatever's in our foreground, we have less definition to what we're doing, more of a smoothness. So back here in these far distant hills, you can see I just wash it in. And again, changing the tops every time. Now what about down here? We have this beautiful red violet. So let's get some rich red first of all. And you can see that my paper is beginning to stretch a little bit because it is getting wet, and that's good. Then I'm going to get some blue on top of that to get it back to purple. It's going to be really dark down there. And maybe these will be kind of like rocks here, or another set of minerals. Now I'm going to wash my brush, pull it through the rag gently, and lift some light into these sections. In fact, what if I were to lift back to this little line here? Can you see this tiny little line right there? I'm going to put some water on, and now I'm going to lift off. I'm going to sort of create a road going back. I can have this road go all the way back if I would like. I'll take a little bit of water and turn the road. Make it very narrow back there as it disappears off over the hills. I keep drying on my rag here, wipe and swipe. And those of you who have been with me here in the studio know that this is one of the favorite techniques that I like to teach, is the wipe and swipe. one wipe on the rag and one swipe through the watercolor to create a nice clean whiteness. And this is really going to have to bend to go back there. Okay, now if I'm going to have such depth here, I should probably have some lightness in other places. So I'll continue with my wiping just to see what I can create here. And of course, the more wetness that you have on the paper, the easier it's going to be to lift off. So if we take this spritzer here and spritz myself in the face, then put a little bit on there, and then we can show you how lifting is easier when it's wet. I really prefer to do this with a large brush because I find that the light is easier the more bristles that you have. We're gonna really bend this across here. Bend that road so that we don't know exactly where it goes, but and as you're painting, you'll find the shape eventually. Now back to our greens, we get a clean yellow again, and let's create a little more dimension around the road so it looks a little more natural. And pick up some of the blues here. And don't worry if it tends to want to bloom back into your white spaces. You can come back later with a dry brush, wash off and dry off and lift again and again to create that barrier. Now some people would use a resist, that is a medium that would actually stop the watercolor from going into the spaces. I could show that in another video, but I really like the way it kind of creates these striations of lines in the watercolor spaces. So I wouldn't be too afraid of letting that happen. Look at this interesting little space here. Something just in the light. Could be fairies or dancing in a ring here. Or maybe it's a bush for you. Now we can't entirely ignore the upper portion, so let's do a little bit of work up there. And we sort of see a beautiful golden yellow which is appearing here on the horizon. Let's start by just sweeping that upwards to soften this area. And we'll just keep going right on up into the red. And when I get up there in the red, and that's going to create a little bit more depth of red on my brush, I'm going to work it into the orange. And you can see I'm filling over here where there's a little bit of missing color. Do I need to have a completely flat sky? Of course not. I can even have some green mist up in there if that's desirable. But I may want it to stay clean. So I'll keep creating a little bit of a barrier of dryness with my brush. Now, these are starting to look like trees almost. So if I take a little bit of blue onto the tip of my brush here, I could just grow those. Perhaps they are evergreens. Some large ones coming into the foreground of the picture. This might come all the way down to the road. Here we have some smaller ones. And I'm allowing the picture to guide me, to show me what needs to happen. So you can see this one's coming here, probably not going to want to be by itself. Another one back there behind it. And that might require maybe even like another big one to grow up here so that we just feel it's natural. Let's bring it all the way up. There's different techniques you can do for creating trees. Depending on what kind of tree it is. And as you get drier and drier painting the wet on wet, you can create more and more definition with the color. And it might be helpful to surround a little green here around the side of the road too, because no road is perfect. Or this is a pathway, perhaps, that hiking pathway. And as I'm doing this, I'm breathing in, relaxing a little bit, enjoying just the pure color experience. I don't want you to get too hung up on having it be sort of exact, okay? So just allow your image of nature to come forward for you. Don't worry if it doesn't look exactly realistic. That's really not the point. The point is to have an experience of color that you enjoy, that you feel makes you evoke an experience for you inside. And that means that things are always going to be changing. Just the way it is. Let's drag a little bit of that color into the front. And this takes our eye back into the background. So beautiful. Now I want to get back into my yellows here, and I told you I like to use one of my buckets for yellow water and one for the red blues, but I often forget about that when I'm painting. So I'm going to stop for a moment and just change my water. Be right back. Okay, I'm back, and it's good to take a little visual break from your work anyway, because then you can see it from another perspective. And now I have a clean yellow and clean water. I'm going to start back here where it's gotten drier and fill this in. Now I can go over green with yellow, but I do have to wipe off in between because if I keep going, I'm just going to be spreading green around. And I'd rather like to keep this brighter back here. So I'm going to work into that, and I can come down here, but I'll just stop, wipe off on the rag then, and continue on, tilting my jar a little bit to get down to the clean yellow. And again, carefully adding yellow in. If I would like to make it a brightness, sort of like a sunset sort of thing, I could lift off a little bit here by doing the wipe and swipe method. Lift to a bit of white and even have that a bit up into our sky. Let's bring a little bit of brighter orange up there by adding yellow on top. Tilt the jar, get some of the thick yellow in the bottom, and put that right on top of the red orange to make it gold. And as I get up here and get a little bit of that reddish color, I'm going to bring it into down here as well. Sunsets aren't perfectly round experiences usually, so I can just allow the color to brightly flow outwards. You think I could bring a little bit onto the ground? Just lightly smooth that in. And sometimes picking up paint from one place on the picture will allow you to control the color. Look at these nice light areas up here. Could be like clouds. Just allow them to look a little bit irregular. Now, as my picture begins to dry somewhat, I can get more and more of the quality of the forms that I want without it blooming into other areas. So up here it's getting quite dry, and I can lift it off and not have to consider that it might bleed or bloom into another part of the picture. Same thing with my pathway. It's pretty dry now, so if I paint on a little bit of water and then carefully lift off, it won't go away so much. And that can be very satisfying. Now you see in here, it's a little bit of a brighter yellow, and I do like that. The reason is that I want this path to disappear back there. And quite oftentimes with color, we'll notice that things get lighter as they get further away. In this case, it's going to be brighter with the sunset. So I'm going to lift a little bit of the green and replace it with the yellow, making sure that I still have my pathway. And here, where it becomes a little bit like a small this might be bumping up over the pathway, in which case I can just smooth that in here, tuck it behind the trees. And see what happened there? We can just paint over that to create that tree again. Looks like this one's been bent a little bit with time. So we'll just give it a little more definition. As I said, the dryness of the painting is what dictates how much things stay. And with the wet on wet technique, we start very wet, and over time it can get a lot drier. In fact, one of the things that I notice in Waldorf schools that the teachers could improve on is that they don't allow the students to ever get to that dry point, because the lesson is over and the students may not want to continue that long on a picture. So this is why it's a good idea to start with a certain theme or color composition like I did, and then come back to it later. Come back when it's dry, reconstitute it with a spritzer or an atomizer of water, or simply just paint on top of it when it's not wet. And that would be a kind of glazing technique or a veiling. The only problem with that kind of work is that you do want it still to look natural, and it won't if the student is drawing exactly onto the picture. So it can be helpful for the teacher to demonstrate that the picture is something that is ever evolving, ever changing, and so that means new trees can grow and new qualities of texture are appearing constantly. Now, do you like the road in white? It's very striking. Perhaps, though, it should have a little bit of some color to it, so it doesn't look like it's just unnatural there. And let's see if we could mix up a little bit of color in a cap, maybe a kind of brown. We know that yellow, red, and blue together are going to create a sort of brown. So here I'm getting a little bit of an orangish color going. And then let's just add a touch of blue to it. Not too much. So otherwise it's going to get green. But if it does, we'll just add a little bit of red. Pretty soon we're going to have a nice golden brown there. And I'm going to use that in the road. Going back, this helps to create the direction too. Could be darker down here in the front. Let's get a little bit of something going on the sides here, almost like there are some gravel or bushes here. Nothing is ever perfect. It does get a little more difficult to create something that looks natural as we get further and further into the details of the picture. Should I do any more in the sky? What do you think? Tell me in the comments if you think I should do something more to the sky. I'd really like to hear what you have to say. So as usual, I'll probably go on and do some more work on this picture because once I get inspired, I don't like to leave it until I'm satisfied, just like you would. But I hope that this brings you joy this morning and makes you feel well. I know it's really helped me. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Please subscribe, or if you'd like to support me on Patreon, I'd really appreciate that. Bye.